All right, we should be connected. Yes, we are connected. I see us
Excellent.
recording. And as well, first of all, welcome to the next LangTime chat episode. And David informed me right before we started recording that he was planning on hanging up on me several times during this call. That is a pre-planned thing. Or maybe that's what you said, or maybe what you really said was that your internet is spotty today, and I'm just taking it personally. I don't know.
What I'm saying is watch yourself. All right. You are already on thin ice.
The thinnest of ice.
You think
And
I've forgotten about that diaresis? Diaresis that you wanted? No.
what I was gonna say, wait, that should be me upset with you because you took it away from me.
Uh-huh. And you were advocating for it. You have to
Uh,
back every single one of my decisions 100%. And I have to back none of yours. That's how this partnership works.
In fact, you find out what I want and then you start taking it away. Central vowels? Oh no.
Oh, but Wema, you
Well,
got
yes, I
Wema.
did get Wema only because I lost something else. That's okay. That's okay. I do have Wema.
Hey, I got a pitch idea. Check this out. So replace Christmas with this. You get gifts, but you also lose stuff of equal value. And you open the gift first and it's very exciting. And then you go back to your room and you see, oh, oh.
Maybe I shouldn't have traded. But there is the question though. Do you get to pick what is
No,
disappearing or you just find out it's gone?
no. Santa brings
Okay.
the presents and then Krampus
Okay.
steals things from you.
Well, I will say not quite the same, but
Mm.
when Will was younger, we always knew around Christmas he was going to be getting lots of toys because kids just collect toys from everybody in life. And so around Christmas, we would always have him go through and say, if you want new ones, like if you want Santa to visit, you have to give stuff away. So he would have to donate
Oh,
before
hang on,
Christmas every year.
Jesse. Hang on.
Yeah.
You've muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, well, I can hear me. Oh, no. I see my
I
microphone
still can't
moving.
hear you. What's happened? Just one
Are you
second.
okay? Are you sure your AirPods are working?
I mean, not as far as I know. Okay, so we're going to do the rest of this podcast where I can't hear Jesse. It says left battery at 98%, right battery at 98%. Wait, are you not recording?
I am. There's a red dot. I'm
Oh, you are
recording.
recording. Yeah, no, we're all recording. Okay, that's good. Well, I'm going to try this again. Hello?
Hello.
It's like, hold on. Speaker. Let's try that. Hello?
Hello.
There you are.
Okay. I was gonna say, I haven't stopped. My little microphone is showing the whole time that I've been talking. So
Hmm.
hopefully on the recording, everybody hears me.
Yeah, I just like that. I mean, we're not going to edit this at all. They're going to hear everything. Just because we are that lazy. Ah, it's like a
Ah,
hard candy Christmas.
you're quoting a Dolly Parton song. I love
I
it.
am. Uh,
Yes.
can I? Okay, a small digression. This is the last one, I swear. What the hell is a hard candy Christmas?
Well, I'm guessing based on context that it's a Christmas where that's all you get. Like your only gift is a piece of hard candy because you just don't have enough money. So it's like you only
But
get these little things, but they mean so much because it's just you and your family.
oh, okay. Why did you choose hard candy? Because like that's the thing that people like.
Well, just a second. What is a hard candy
No,
Christmas?
yeah. So here's I. It reminded me of the song Wonderwall by Oasis. You know Wonderwall?
Of course.
Okay. So for first many times I heard it, it was like you have this chorus, and lately. No, he sings better than that. I just want to throw a dig at him. But
Uh-huh.
you know, but maybe you're going to be the one that saves me. And after all, here comes the big payoff. You're my wonder wall. So you're thinking, what the hell is a wonder wall? right?
You, obviously.
I know. So it's like, is this, it's weird because it's like, this is the metaphor that's supposed to pay off where you're supposed to get it. That's going to make the whole song make sense. And it's just nothing. It's like, I didn't get it at all. Now, it turns out that,
Mhm.
of course, he was referring to a rare George Harrison album called
Oh,
Wonderwall.
okay.
And so that was what he meant. It was kind of like, you were my, rare find that that always makes me happy, or something to that effect. But it was something real. Like, it was just a name we didn't know. It would be
Fair
like,
enough.
I don't know, if I said to you, it's like, wow, you're my Dan Marley. Do you know who Dan Marley is?
No.
No. See, so it means nothing to you, even though, like, Dan Marley was a pretty big deal in my life. So then there was Wonderwall, and it's like, well, if you don't, it just doesn't even sound like a name. Anyway, so I thought it meant nothing, but it meant something. So Hard Candy
Okay.
Christmas
So
is
on the one hand, I was right because it says the
okay.
phrase hard candy Christmas refers to a time when many families did not have much money and could only afford to give penny candy to their children.
Oh,
However, it's got another meaning on top of that because what I didn't realize was that the song was actually written for and first performed in the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And so the lyrics of
oh,
the song, it says here, suggest the many choices and difficult decisions girls have to make as they move on, specifically as they're leaving. Because, well, I won't give any spoilers anyway.
yeah, because I still haven't seen it.
You should. But
So
I did not realize that it actually debuted and was written expressly for that movie.
no, I didn't either. And now though, so we are given to understand that Hard Candy Christmas is it's something that people would have known. Like, hearers of the song would have been like, oh yeah,
Maybe. I actually have no idea. I just always assumed that that's what it referred to because I know from like Little House on the Prairie that they used to give fruit or candy for Christmas and that was it. And so like to me that was just like, oh, it's a hard candy Christmas. Like that's all we can give.
hmm.
I don't know.
See, when I was listening to it the first time, I thought it was going to be Christmas like a hard candy, and it's like, Christmas that you kind of suck on and has good flavor.
It's a peppermint stick. That's what it is. Okay. We're going to move
Yeah.
on from
Okay.
that
Yes.
to today's topic. We've been going for almost 10 minutes and don't have a topic for the day.
Yeah.
Okay. So, some of our listeners are in the United States, so you'll know about this holiday. Others are not, and so you may not be aware of our holiday here in the United States that is still on the government books and like banks still get off, and it is Columbus Day. Now, mind you, Columbus Day is now kind of being taken over by a much better holiday, which is the National Indigenous Peoples Day. And so that's the one I'm choosing to celebrate today. It is Monday, October 12th, by the way,
Yeah.
on the day of recording. You won't hear it till November 1st, but just understand that this is all very timely. But anyway, I'm assuming that because we're the same age, that you had the same education I did, where like I learned a lot about Columbus and the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, that whole thing.
Yeah.
But like, you don't really learn about the people other than the fact that there were people that he misnamed the Indians because he thought he was in India. But like, we never really learned about the people here other than just historical notes as needed for the colonization kind of history. Is that the same kind of education you had?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, did you make a boat?
Oh, always.
Yeah.
Always. Like and usually it was like a newspaper boat that you actually like got to go outside and play and it was all exciting because we had school on it, but it was always like a free day where we got to like celebrate all day. And there are schools now that just get it off. There are like right now banks are off today and it's because on the calendar it says Columbus Day and it's like
Yeah.
such a bizarre day. it makes much more sense to celebrate the indigenous peoples.
Yeah, no, but this actually might be interesting, especially for our listeners outside of the United States. So part of what many, many young children do is, a quote unquote celebration of this holiday, or just in learning about it, is you make a boat. So yeah, it can be out of newspaper. We also did it out of cardboard, not for sailing, but for
Okay.
making it look nice. And so, yeah, you just make a boat that's like one of the boats that Columbus sailed on or the
Hmm.
Pilgrims sailed on, right? And and you just make little models of them, and so that'll be like your art project for a day or two, depending on how much effort is put into it. And that's like one of the things that you remember from your early
Yes.
education.
Well, in
Uh,
one of the
really
years,
study
and
boats.
right, one year, I think it was my eighth grade year, we actually got to do like it was like a not quite a silkscreen press, but it was that same kind of idea. And so everybody brought in a just a white t-shirt or plain color shirt, and we got to paint the boat stencils on shirts. And so that was like the big thing. So you had a shirt that you made with the three boats.
Huh.
It was, I mean, like seriously though, like exactly what you're saying. Like this was a big deal. Still is in a lot of places, because I know even when Will was in daycare, he brought home macaroni art that was the macaroni noodles for the ocean, and then the three boats were on it. I mean, like we still make boats. We are obsessed with these freaking boats. So, welcome to America, where we
Yeah.
celebrate boats. Um, okay, so in honor of what I'm calling the actual holiday,
Mm.
I have selected three languages that were spoken by Indigenous people of. I'm going to go ahead and restrict it. I'm telling you now, because it's going to be some rounds of name that language. I'm going to give you facts, and you're going to have to tell me what language I'm
Okay.
talking about.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but I did restrict it to continental United States territory. And so that automatically takes out a lot of language families that would be, say, in Alaska or even
Yeah.
Hawaii. So like we're
Yeah.
really
Like
just looking.
two of my favorites. Two of my favorites that I know a lot about. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. One of the reasons, by the way, I restricted it is because I'm going to hopefully save enough time at the end that you can teach me something about Hawaiian, because I know that that is a language that you um, know stuff about, and it's a language that I just find so beautiful. And so I was like, well, at the end David can tell me about a language. And so I had already thought through that, which is why I took Hawaii out
Yes.
of the
I love
running.
it.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
there are others though, and they were only languages that I could find information about. They're all on walls. And so that also tells you a little bit more, because obviously there's tons of languages that it could be, but I wasn't trying to be mean and like stump David on a podcast. Um, I
Probably
wasn't
going to
trying to
do it
do
anyway.
that. Well, because there's a lot of languages, and what
Yeah.
I'm going to do is give you features, so typological features from walls, and I'm going to wait. This is the part of the game, by the way, where I keep going back and forth. I'm like, should I give him the family and genus up front? But then I think for some of them, that may narrow it down so much that you already know the language before having to listen to any facts.
Okay.
So I think what I'm going to do is on the first one, we're going to see how it goes. We're rolling with the punches today, everyone.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to read the facts first, and then I'm going to tell you the family and genus. And if at any point you're like, oh no, I already know the language, feel free to guess. And then I also have websites pulled up in case you need to ask more questions.
Okay. Cool.
So language number one, and we're going to have three languages, by the way, just so that way you
Got it.
know what's going on. And I'm trying to position my document so I can still see you.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter to anybody else but me, but
That's
I like to
nice.
see what you're thinking.
I'd like to see
Um,
me too.
We have already established this. All right. So this language, are you ready?
Yeah.
This language has a moderately large consonant inventory, but a small vowel inventory with only in between 2 or 4 unique vowel qualities in it, which means it has a high consonant to vowel ratio because a lot more consonants than vowels. It does have a voicing contrast in fricatives, but not in plosives, and its voiceless stop series includes aspirated, unaspirated, and ejective phonemes. Its syllable structure is moderately complex, and it has simple tones. So that's some information about its sounds. And by the way, like, I was kind of excited to see moderately complex syllable structure, which connects to our hopefully going to be complex syllable structure of our language coming up. I also found it interesting that there's no voicing contrast in the plosives, but it does have the aspirated, unaspirated, and ejectives. That I was like, ooh, this is good.
Okay,
Right.
so the only tone language I know for sure, I'm pretty sure is not it, because it has for open syllables. I didn't think there were any tone languages in the Pacific Northwest, but I would be surprised. I know I wouldn't be surprised. Shoot, can you give me something else?
Oh, that was just the sound facts.
Okay,
I'm ready for the morphosyntactic facts.
got it.
This language has SOV word order with postpositions. And while its adjectives appear after nouns, its demonstratives appear before nouns.
That's
And
nice to know. It's nice to know that happens. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly, right? Like, I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
cool. It has a very large system for contrast in its demonstrative system, so much so that I have a whole article pulled up about it because this is something we're going to have to talk about.
Wow.
So it's at least, based on what I can understand, it ranked on walls in the 5 or more way contrast system. Based on what I can find, there are at least 6 ways that it splits for its demonstratives. And then like the different kinds of inflections that go on it make it look like there's like 20 different ways. Anyway, so this is something we're going to talk more about. Although the language is a strong prefixing language, it has plural suffixes for its nouns. On its verbs, you mark both the A and P arguments, with the P argument being marked before the A argument. So looking at that sort of agent-patient terminology there. And verbs can inflect for situational and epistemic possibility, and its nouns do not have any case marking. This language differentiates the comitative from the instrumental, and in noun phrase coordination, its word for and is identical to that comitative with, which I thought was
that's
nice.
nice. So isn't that something that we did?
Yes, it is. And so I was very excited. I was like, yay.
That's cool.
that is nice to have. In terms of semantics, the word for finger and hand are the same, but the word for hand and arm are different. And this language has a decimal numeral based system. So nothing like, Ingala.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so those are my facts. And then I'm going to tell you the family.
Okay.
And then I can give you the genus as well within the family. The larger family, though, and I'm hoping I'm saying this right, is Nadene. N-A-D-E-N-E.
I certainly know that family. Keep going.
Its genus is Athapascan. Within that family.
All right. I'm unwilling to commit. Give it to me. What is it?
Navajo.
Navajo. Okay. Navajo is tonal?
It has simple tones. That's what it says in walls. That's how it's categorized.
How on earth?
So here's one thing before we talk about its demonstratives. This is a paragraph I found from its Wikipedia page. Everything I just read, by the way, was from walls. And so, I verified things. But this paragraph I found really interesting. It says, in terms of basic word order, Navajo has been classified as subject, object, verb, right? However, some speakers order the subject and object based on noun ranking. And in this system, nouns are ranked into 3 categories: humans, animals, inanimate objects. And within those categories, nouns are ranked by strength, size, and intelligence. Whichever of the subject or object has a higher rank appears first in the sentence structure. As a result, the agent of an action may be syntactically ambiguous because it may be the object, but show up first in the sentence structure. And so linguists, including Eloise Jelinek, consider Navajo to be a discourse configurational language in which the word order is not fixed by syntactic rules, but determined by pragmatic factors in the communicative context.
And it's not an inverse system, yeah? So like, I guess, wow. That's really, so the inverse system for those listening is one where the arguments are always ranked by animacy. And it is always assumed that the more highly animate argument is the agent. And when it is not, there is some sort of either a verb modification or a particle that tells you that the opposite thing is true. In this case, it sounds like there is this kind of animacy system that is optional that speakers will use, but there's no inverse marker to help you out. It kind of reminds me of Japanese, where it's like, oh yeah, Japanese is super pro drop, but there's no marking on the verb whatsoever. It's like, how do you do it? You just know.
You figure it out. Well, in that too, because, which is why I don't think there's any sort of strategy for the inverse marking, because it does say it would be syntactically ambiguous at that point.
Yeah.
And as a reminder, back to the facts I read, there's no case marking. So it's not like there's even case marking on the subject or object to really help you out. It would disambiguate though, if, because it does mark for both subject and object on the verb, it does have that bipersonal marking. And so like, I would imagine that would help out in some cases, but it's not always, because I mean, some of them are going to carry similar, it's going to be third person singular for both of them, and you still have to figure out which one's subject or object. So that I just found that really interesting. I didn't know that about Navajo.
I wonder, well, you have to do some sort of a prosodic study of it. If there was some sort of prosodic weight given to it, if there was a mismatch, that would be interesting to look at. But that's really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to share a screen right now with David. We're recording this through Zoom, and so for eventually when videos are released, other people will see this. But this is actually the spatial terms that I was talking about with those demonstratives, because I was looking it up to find more information about it, because I was just really interested in such a large, to have so many different distinctions that could be made. And so here's what I mean when, like I say, there are technically 6 ways, but it's also each spatial term ends up getting split up into whether it's here, there, nearby, or there. So for instance, since you're not seeing the screen in the podcast right now, we're looking at 6 different words for here. And so one means here at this location or point in time. One means here, this way, around here, or hereabout. But there's another one that also means here, hereabout, or around here. And this whole paper is just about trying to figure out when to use one versus another. There's a 4th term that means right here, or at this place close at hand. Another one that means here at this place. And then yet another that says here at this place or point in time, which very much overlaps with the first one I read. So there's 6 different words. And yeah, it's very intense. And so this entire article, and I can link to it when I actually post this in Patreon, I'll link to this article because they argue that really it's like, if you look at the number of terms for these demonstratives, it's incredibly overwhelming. But they show that there's a sort of typology and a sense to it. And like, they even give you like these tables to do like you have this particular prefix means this particular thing, and it has this, proximate or distal kind of feature. So anyway, it's sort of a mix and match bag, if you will, of like 6 or 7 different features being coded, and you put the features together to get the meaning that it creates. But I was blown away because like when I think of demonstratives, I think of 2-way, 3-way distinction, maybe 4-way, but like I've never actually created a conlang with more than a 3-way distinction.
I mean, this is a 3-way distinction, right? It's just a 3-way distinction on top, right? That has more distinctions as you get further down.
Within it, which I found interesting because WALS specifically codes it as a 5 or more way distinction. So I don't know within WALS, because unfortunately with the information on WALS, you can tell like how it's coded, but you don't know the specifics about it. They just tell you like it fits in this feature. And so I wanted to, like, I didn't have enough time to really read through this whole article, but I wanted to see, because down below it in the conclusion, they specifically say it is a 6-way distinction, but I can't figure out exactly how, in terms of how they're doing that. So this is just something that I need to read more about. I just found it cool. Have you ever made anything with a large distinction in conlangs?
I mean, probably. I just don't remember.
The problem when you make too many conlangs.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly what I done. I mean,
Oh man.
goodness.
So yeah, and also one of the reasons that I have long been fascinated by Navajo specifically, is because we did learn a little bit more about the Navajo people in history in my history classes, in K through 12 kind of education, partially because of World War II and the Navajo code talkers, the wind talkers. And so like that, to me, I found really, really interesting, especially given the fact that they had Navajo speakers put these military terms into Navajo. So not only did you have to be able to speak Navajo, which like nobody could break that code in the first place, but then if you actually translated it, it was things like the word for like a certain kind of armored vehicle was actually, they called it a turtle because it had like a shell on it. And so like they used Navajo words that even if you knew what they were saying, you still had to match them to what they actually meant in the sort of army lingo. And so anyway, like if you don't know anything about the Navajo code talkers, I highly suggest looking it up because I found that really, really interesting. And it made me more interested in knowing about the language, even as a young scholar. Although I still obviously don't know everything about it. I
We're
think though
still young.
Duolingo, oh, thank you. Duolingo has a Navajo course, I believe.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I wonder how they
Speaking of
do it.
the owl on your shirt.
Yeah. No, but like, I wonder how they do it. I'm gonna have to give that a look because I've always wondered how they do the highly agglutinative ones, at least for the verbs. How would you teach that? I have to go give that
That's a
a
good
look.
question. Yeah. And speaking of a language with interesting verbs, let's go on to language 2.
All right.
All right. So here are the facts about this language. And of course, if you're listening along at home, try to play along and figure out which language I'm talking about. Oh, and I will say, I'll give this little hint. I did choose for my 3 languages, I chose from different geographical regions, just so that way I could kind of spread out across the country. Okay. So this language has an average consonant inventory and an average vowel inventory, leaving it with a moderately high consonant to vowel ratio. It has voicing contracts in the fricatives, but does not have any voicing contrast in plosives. And its voiceless stop series also includes aspirated, unaspirated, and ejective stops. So far, those features are in line with Navajo. It contrasts, though, oral and nasal vowel qualities. Its syllable structure is complex and it does not have any tone. This language is also SOV word order with postpositions. Its adjectives appear after nouns as well, but its demonstratives can actually appear before or after nouns. So there are some sort of grammatical considerations that have to be made, which I'd have to look into more to understand what they are. Its numbers appear after nouns. So if you're counting nouns, it would be dogs 3, just like dogs beautiful. And it has a 3-way distinction in its demonstrative system. Its pronouns do not carry any gender distinctions. And its nouns have very few inflections. So for instance, it does not mark for case. And even plurality is indicated on its own word rather than as any sort of affix or other marking on the noun itself. On the other hand, its verbs can be marked for upwards of 10 to 11 inflections. And yet it has no past tense or future tense for its verb marking, and it has no grammatical marking for perfective or imperfective aspects. So all those inflections are other things. And this language uses productive full and partial reduplication and differentiates comitative from instrumental. Its family is Suan, and its genus is Corsuan.
Lakota?
Yeah. Indeed. See, I didn't want to give family away first because it's like, how many Suan languages would you have guessed?
Well, speaking of a language I thought I knew a little bit about. Jeez.
Isn't that okay? And so here I've got a couple of things that I actually copied again from the Wikipedia article. Sometimes they have really good sources on there. But two of the things about the verbs, because verbs in particular, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what all these inflectional possibilities are if it's not doing what I would think of for verb inflections. And so it says that one set of morphemes indicate person and number of the subject of active verbs. And then they have a different set of morphemes that agree with the object of transitive action verbs or the subject of stative verbs. And so that seems to be potentially kind of tripartite kind of system, the way that's broken out. It says that most of those morphemes are prefixes, but plural subjects are marked with a suffix and third person plural objects with an infix. And I was like, what? And they give examples too of these paradigms, but I was like, oh my gosh, it would take me forever to figure out how to say a statement in Lakota. First person arguments may be singular, dual, or plural, but second and third person arguments are only either singular or plural. And then there are also a number of enclitic particles that follow the verb, which many of which actually differ depending on whether the speaker is male or female. And so the enclitics, so rather than an inflection necessarily marked on the verb, the enclitics are what would then differentiate certain aspects and moods and things like that. And they also, the interrogative enclitics, they actually show finer distinctions in meaning. And so they have one that's just a usual question marking enclitic, but then a different one for rhetorical questions and one for dubitative, like a tag question in English. Dubitative. Where do we get these words in linguistics?
Dubitative, it comes from doubt.
Right, but like, why not just call it the doubtful wa instead of dubitative wa?
The doubtful wa. Oh my goodness.
The actual enclitic is wa, so that's where I got that from, but it's just interesting to me how we come up with these. Okay, but anyway, so that that is such a perfect one too for marking doubt. So yeah, so that is the information on Lakota. Now you said you thought you knew, did you study Lakota or?
Not super a lot, but I was familiar with it from, well, of course, but this book has its own kind of controversial history, doesn't it? Black Elk Speaks. Really, really enjoyed that book, which features, Lakota in it. But then at the same time, it was supposed to be taking down the story as remembered by, a very old man at that point, Black
Mm-hmm.
Elk, taken down by somebody else. And then I can't remember exactly what it was, but the sense was that both of them understood like kind of what the purpose was. And so it was more like he was recounting his own history, but perhaps kind of like guiding it in a certain way as to make a point anyway. So its accuracy is in doubt. But I mean, before I knew that, I thought it was really amazing. I don't know.
So I
But
didn't actually take this
nasality,
class.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And
That's
I
interesting.
didn't take it when I was in Colorado, but one of the scholars on Lakota is David Rood, and he was teaching at University of Colorado while I was there. And so when
Oh.
he did field methods, he used a Lakota speaker. And so students were
Mm.
working on Lakota when they did it. Now, I took my field methods class, and in case any of you are unfamiliar, field methods as a course, what it does is a speaker will come in, and as students you have to elicit data, and so it's meant to mimic field work, but obviously in a classroom setting where somebody's helping guide you through like whether these are good questions to be asking or how to form questions. And so anyway, when I took it, I actually didn't have it when David taught it. I had it when Zygmunt Freisinger taught it, and he brought in a speaker of a language called Kafenono, which is spoken in parts of Ethiopia. And so,
Oh, wow.
which was a fascinating language. So like, I'm totally fine with that. It's just, I didn't get the Lakota experience that so many other people who went to CU had because they did take it with David Rood.
You should have taken it again.
Yeah, but when you're counting hours and trying to get a certain trying to get a certain number of classes taken under certain prefixes and whatnot, sometimes that just doesn't
Yeah, man,
happen. Because yeah, I
that was
was
great.
actually
I don't know anything about this other language you've taken. You've been holding out on me again.
we apparently have to talk more about my grad school work. Um, yeah, it was a very interesting class. Obviously very challenging if you've never thought about trying to do any sort of field methods or field work. It's difficult to try to figure out like what data to elicit to figure out patterns without making too many big assumptions. Because then the next thing you think what a certain marker is, but then you're totally wrong because you just assumed that it was like how English categorizes things. It's just it's
Yeah.
just really interesting.
Well, I mean, another way to go about it though is to start with making assumptions, but keeping an open mind, you know?
Hmm.
So it's almost like, here is my assumption based on everything I've seen. I assume this. Let's try to elicit some data that would show that that's false.
Right.
Um, and then, but of course, the more data you can get, the more helpful it is because
Hmm.
figuring out the right questions is sometimes hard. Um,
Right.
by the way, this should be a future episode of this where we talk about grad school. It could be called mistakes we made.
What mistakes did I make?
None. I mean, by your degree, obviously none. But you could humor me.
Uh, yes, good humor. No, I feel very lucky, and this is a conversation for another day, but I do feel very lucky because like the exact year that I came in and specifically started working on doctoral level classes was like the 1 year span where they actually offered these more advanced like semantics and syntax courses that normally weren't offered. And so like I got to take these classes that people who had been there for years couldn't take. And I was actually only at the university taking classes for 3 years. And so I managed to like get all these classes. Other people were like, I've been waiting for years for that to come up. So I was very, very lucky with how just the timing played out. I'm trying to think, and that is right. I would have only 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, and then we would have moved.
Did you finish your degree remotely?
Yeah, because we moved to Buffalo, so Chris could start his PhD. And so I
I was only there
finished.
for 3 years too. We were there for the exact same 3 years. I mean,
Oh, wow.
different school, of course.
Right? And I'm trying to, for some reason, the math doesn't feel like it's working, but that has to be right. And wow, this is such an uninteresting thing to be doing on a podcast because, like, I'm literally just counting on my fingers to figure out what years I was there. So I'm sorry. But at the same time, I'm like, wait, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6. I must have been there for 6, 7. So for 4 years. Doing coursework. It's just some of my coursework I had to do independent studies because I had a child. So I wasn't on campus. So that's why I was thinking that part of the time was gone there. Okay. That's all neither here nor there. That's another day's discussion. We'll talk grad school and just dive in on that another day. We have one more language before
All right.
you teach me some Hawaiian.
Okay.
Okay. This language, flipped from the others, has a small consonant inventory with an average vowel inventory. So it actually has a low consonant to vowel ratio. It does not have any voicing contrasts in either plosives or fricatives. And it contrasts oral and nasal vowels, but only for 2. So it only has 2 nasal vowels that are phonemic. And interestingly enough, they're at that sort of mid height. So they're the and o are the 2 that can be nasal, nothing else. And not the
Okay,
a,
so
the
yeah, so versus and
Yeah,
o versus on. Cool.
exactly. And
Got
the
it.
rest of them are not phonemic. It does not have any tone, and its stress is a weight-sensitive system that is right-oriented, so it appears in one of the last 3 syllables of the word one of the last 3 syllables of the word with iambic rhythm. And so it's not always consistent which syllable because it's weight-sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And this language has no dominant word order, something we're going to talk more about because I actually found this really interesting paragraph about that, and is a nominative accusative language. It does not inflect for past tense, but it does have an inflection for future tense. This language has 3 genders, and its word for finger and hand are the same, but the word for hand and arm are different. This one I have less information on. Oh, I forgot to tell you the family. This will help, but there will still be some bigger languages that you could know from within it. The family is Iroquoian.
Oh.
And genus is Northern Iroquoian. And I have a personal connection with this one too, based on where I've lived.
Oh, right.
Because this language would have been spoken in areas for one of the places where I lived.
Long Beach.
Wrong side of the country.
No, so like I have to say this one has me absolutely buffaloed.
Oh, but you used the verb for the place. And there's really no way I can give another clue without just saying it.
Sure.
It is Seneca. And so there are a lot of, in the Buffalo area, like there's Seneca Falls, and there's a lot of like Seneca names that pop up. And so I had seen the name, and what I didn't realize until I had done more research on it was I didn't realize that Seneca was actually one of the languages of the Iroquoian peoples. Probably because anytime I ever read about Iroquois or Iroquoian people, it's always presented in art history books as like one group, right? Like, so I think until I researched more, I thought that Iroquois was just like, there would be one Iroquois language or something like that, right? Like I just thought of them as one group. And actually, there are 7 pretty, okay, I won't say big, but there are like 7 different languages that I had at least heard of associated in this Iroquoian family. And so just another way that our history books like totally butcher the way we learn history, because it like fails to distinguish the fact that it's not just like one group of people, it's actually multiple groups. And so this one, because it's got that no dominant word order. And so here's something I found out about it because, well, 2 things really. So I'm going to read you 2 paragraphs.
Okay.
And then one I'm going to screen share because I have to show you this beautiful table.
Okay.
It's just
Okay. I
beautiful.
can't wait.
I'm so excited. Okay. So Seneca has no dominant word order. Unfortunately, on the Wikipedia article, they say no free word order, which I can have another discussion on that entirely for why I don't like that, you know, the whole free word order thing.
Yeah.
Rather, new information appears first in a Seneca sentence. So when a noun is judged by the speaker to be more newsworthy than a verb in the same sentence, it's likely to appear before the verb. If it doesn't hold that relevance, though, it typically follows the verb. Particles, the only Seneca words that cannot be classified as nouns or verbs, appear to follow the same ordering paradigm. And so I found that interesting in terms of, you know, the newsworthiness and relevance to the situation, but also that little line right there, that particles are the only Seneca words that cannot be classified as nouns or verbs. I find that fascinating, and I want to know more about that and see if it's actually. But
Yeah.
this may be why they have some amazing derivations. And so like I'm now inspired, and we need to figure out how to get some of these derivations just hooked into the possum language or something. So a noun can be incorporated into a verb base by placing it before the middle voice or reflexive prefix. So there's like all these different ways that you can actually incorporate even nouns into the verbs in Seneca. And then they have derivational suffixes that can be added at the end of a base noun to alter the meaning of the verb that it's incorporated in. And I'm going to share this table. And again, from Wikipedia, therefore, I need to find more information about it because you always got to verify. But they've got just this beautiful set of derivational suffixes. Not all of them. This is just some examples. And of course, they all have wonderful names like ambulative, andative, facilitative, however you say that. But they've got these great names, and they give, you know, like kind of very specific meanings. Like the ambulative suffix says that this happens while walking. Or the andative, it indicates the agent travels to a different location to perform the action. Like, how handy is that? Oh, there's even one that indicates the event is imminent. It's going to happen, which they call andative plus purposive. How would you say that? Purposive? Purposive.
Yeah. No, purposive.
It sounds more fun to say purposive, so let's do it.
Right. I suppose. Also more fun to say affix, I suppose.
You don't like affix, you like affix, don't you?
Yeah.
Which you would think with my love for the ash, but for some reason I always say affix, and I don't know if it's because
Of Aphex
whenever
Twin.
what's that?
The band Aphex Twin.
No.
Sorry.
But I think it's because in class, whenever I'm trying to distinguish for my students the larger category, like I really stress the affix because I'm trying to get them to remember how to write it and spell it. I don't know why I don't just say affix. I don't know. But
You
you
could do it
also, I
the
mean, at this
British
point,
way. Affix.
affix. But I also feel like at this point, people know that I just say words the way I say them.
Yeah.
And so there you go.
Yeah. So these are verb prefixes, right?
So they, according to this, they're added at the end of a base noun, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, that
inside
makes
a
sense.
verb.
Yeah.
So that's what these are. But it's such a beautiful list. There's a reversive, kind of like our un in English, benefactive, distributives, just all these
Yeah.
wonderful little derivations. And so this could be why it's claimed that there's only nouns, verbs, and particles, because if you
Yeah.
have these kinds of derivations, which would take over a lot of sort of adverb kind of things, like I could see that they would also have a very rich sense of derivations to indicate more adjective-y type things.
Yeah. There is so much in what I'm seeing and everything you've said that are just to my mind the hallmarks of misanalysis.
Okay.
But
Okay. And it may be
we need
because
it. We need a
obviously this is,
we need a grammar in this language. This looks really cool.
you know what, actually, after we're done talking, I'm gonna see if I can find any freely available PDF kind of grammars that I could put up for these three languages in particular. Like I know Navajo has a lot more
Oh,
information
sure.
out about it because
Yeah.
there is a lot more information. And like I said, Duolingo, you can take a
Yeah.
course there. Lakota, I know, has a lot of information, but I don't know how much of it is electronically available.
Hmm.
And I don't know much about Seneca. So like that is
Yeah, this one.
definitely,
I'm gonna spend some
let's
time
see.
looking at that. That's really cool.
So, but even if it's
Wow.
misanalysis, even if, like, there's some great derivations, and
Oh
we
no,
didn't get
like,
around in Ingala, we didn't get around to making too many derivations. So like I'm hoping this time we have more time
yeah.
to get into that.
It's kind of a weird thing because it's like that's part of the fun, but there's so much pressure to fill out the grammar because
Yeah.
people are watching and yapping at you.
Yes, and it's also difficult because when you are trying to do things like incorporate specific name forms, like to get like some of them, luckily it came through, like being able to get like the tensibe, where it's like that collective derivation, like so some of them it was more easily done. Um, but sometimes that's also hard when you're trying to get words so you can say sentences, not necessarily
Yeah.
like what are some nuances that we could build into the derivations.
And plus, you just want to spend time with those things, and it's hard to do that
Right.
type of a thing. But
But you don't think people just want to look at us staring at our computer screens?
I mean, I do. But so I should be clear when I say that that there are lots of things in there that I think they look misanalyzed. First of all, I don't know. You got to look at it. Second of all, what I mean, it's never the data that's wrong. The data is never wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, it's it's the linguists who are up to monkey business, like the
Linguists are
darling
never wrong.
Wikipedia article that states that like English has 7 different hortatives, and it's also the only
Yes.
language that so happens to distinguish each of those separate 7 different hortatives. It's like,
I think they took that down though, and I'm
they
actually going to
they
double check
better
that
they better have. That was
be because I swear we had this conversation before
mm,
when we were talking about the hortative.
yeah.
And I was like, I'm pretty sure they have fixed that. Um,
It's just like sometimes you see these things in grammars where it says, look, there are 7 things that this language distinguishes, and it just so happens that only the language I'm studying distinguishes it, and I get to come up with terms for it. It's like, hmm.
okay, so it appears that they still do say that we have quite a few of them, but I think it's expressed better. So
Thank
for
goodness.
instance, um, they give examples of like let us go versus have got to express obligation. But a lot of these are like, eesh, it starts getting into, we just got so many paraphrastic constructions in English that it's so hard for me when people want to label it as, this is optative, this is imperative, this is hortative. Um, I don't know. A lot of it's just well, we use these, but I was
Yeah.
also educated at a construction grammar institution. So, I
Well,
think in terms of construction.
it'd be kind of like, I mean, it's just the type of bizarre thing where you could say that, English is the only language that has a commentative counterfactual, which is a special verb form that is only used by sports commentators when narrating highlights, where it's a special use of the present tense to
Hmm.
indicate a counterfactual, but again, only sports commentators and only when narrating highlights. And it's just like, well, I'm not sure that you've discovered a new grammatical category there. It's
Or
just a
just
way that,
that we've
English
agreed
speakers are
to mark
using.
these.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I did not leave as much time as I thought if we're going for our normal hour range, but like I would
Oh,
like
is
to
that where we're
know
going?
a little something about Hawaiian.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I often forget that we're supposed to keep this to a certain time. But then we also have things to do.
That too. So, you
I
know,
keep
um,
forgetting. Uh, but yeah, I mean, do you know most of the basic stuff about Hawaiian?
so one of the main features that always comes up in my mind when I think of the language is the fact that it has very few consonants, and its vowels can differentiate for length. Is I believe like there's long and short vowel
Yeah, yeah.
distinctions. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
though you wouldn't know that if you got the first Teach Yourself book that I got.
oh no.
No, oh, it was a doozy. They just didn't even acknowledge that there were long vowels in Hawaiian because I guess they thought
Ooh,
you would just know.
you'd
Yeah.
figure it out. It's all
They
right.
also they also didn't always write the glottal stop, only certain times.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, it's kind of a
even
big deal.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Hawaiian exists in this group with Polynesian that's very
Hmm.
similar to Romance, in that if you look at the various Romance languages, it's very clear you're basically looking at the same language with
Hmm.
differing, grammatical features and then, different phonological features.
Sure.
Um, so if you look at Hawaiian and Tongan and Samoan
Hmm.
and Maori, you'll see basically the same language with minor grammatical and lexical variations. And each of them does have a small consonant inventory.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of how they do it.
Yeah.
Um, isn't in there. So it's like if you look at the proto language, or at least the proto form, Proto Polynesian, right?
Hmm.
The consonant inventory, it distinguished R and L, it distinguished N and Engma, it distinguished S, F, and H, and then it also had PT and K and a glottal stop.
Okay.
Um, and all of the various Polynesian languages have done different things to
Hmm.
those. Uh, so it's like if you look at Maori, it merged L and R, but it merged it into R.
Hmm.
Hawaiian had a lot of mergers. So what happened is Hawaiian merged R and L into L.
Hmm.
Hawaiian deleted its glottals completely, which
Okay.
was one of the huge things for Hawaiian. So it deleted its glottal stop and it deleted its glottal fricative, just completely gone. And that left a gap. And that initiated a pull chain. So what happened was the absence of the glottal stop allowed the K to drift backwards, and K drifted backwards to the glottal stop. And it
Gotcha.
allowed T to drift backwards to K, leaving a
Hmm.
blank spot at T. There are certain dialects of Hawaiian that still have T uh, as an alternate for K, but the main one has split it. And that's where the pull chain stopped. So it didn't pull P back to T or anything like that.
Did the same thing happen with the fricatives? Because another
Yes.
thing that I do know about Hawaiian is that Mele Kalikimaka is literally Merry Christmas, but rendered in the sounds that they have available to them in the language. And so, like, all the S's are gone. And so
Yeah.
that, interesting. Okay.
It should have been, I mean, in my opinion, did I just say that?
Yeah, you
That's
did.
okay. That's okay. Since we heavily edit this podcast, you'll edit that out. I would have done it as mele akalihi maha,
Okay.
but I don't know. I guess the core, well, it was an old sound change, and so really what they're trying to get at is the coronality of the
Yeah.
S,
Yeah.
and the best you can do with that, while preserving the voicelessness, is K. It's a little bit further forward than H, but S and F in Hawaiian merged into H after H was deleted.
Okay.
And so that's what left it so sparse. And so like you get something like in Samoan is alofa for love or hello and so on, which becomes aloha in Hawaiian.
Sure.
By the way, with that proto sound in there, isn't it kind of close to love? Alofa.
I think so. I think so. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that that means that it was English at some point. I always love it when people like try to make these like there was one argument that Basque was related to, I think it was like Bantu languages, because the word for water was similar. And you know, like as linguists, we're all just like shaking our heads like, what, why, what? And that would be similar, where it's like, oh, alofa, oh, it must have been related to, you know, all these English words in Germanic.
A protoform for I in Hawaiian is mata, M-A-T-A, which is identical to mata for I in Greek. And so
so it's obviously, yes, a Greek language
proto-world.
as well.
Proto-world.
Okay, so does that mean that the word for I in Hawaiian is maka?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm learning.
Yeah. And so Hawaiian, of course, does have the long and short vowel distinction. It got more long vowels though after the glottal deletion.
Okay.
Also a lot more VV sequences, but where they were identical, it resulted in long vowels.
Okay.
Yeah. But then in terms of grammaticality, Hawaiian is wonderful in that it's a verb initial language. It's VSO. And the only time you see mix up with that are in two scenarios. One where there's negation, where the negator is pulled out in front and is very similar to what we did in Ingala. So it's like negator, noun, verb, noun.
Gotcha.
And then a class of verbs called loa'a verbs, which are essentially ergative. It's a very small class of verbs, but it's like ordinarily what you have with a transitive verb in Hawaiian is a verb, noun, noun, and just the sound E. And it's just a little particle, and it's a preposition that comes before objects, but also indirect objects. With these loa'a verbs, you get a verb like loa'a, and it's that verb, noun, noun, and then the noun is the agent, whereas the first noun is the patient. Yeah, so it's pretty cool, but it really is just a small class of verbs that you just have to memorize.
Do any of them have any semantic kind of distinctions, or is it literally just random?
No, you could tell, like if you look at the most of the verbs, like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. These form kind of a natural class, except for the verb loa'a, which means like to steal or to take or something. It seems very odd for that one.
Amazing. Okay.
But, so Hawaiian, of course, makes heavy use of both partial and full reduplication for many different purposes. To the extent that they don't even list all of them in the dictionary. They just, or it's just like, or the definition of this one will just be reduplication of this, and you just have to go and figure out how it means, or how the reduplication affected it, which is kind of annoying. I prefer that they just say it. It's like, especially now in the digital age, we're not hurting for space here. And then two of the more complex things in terms of, I'll give you three complex things in terms of Hawaiian grammar, because they distinguish inclusivity for the first person nouns, and there's singular and dual and plural. So there are a bunch of pronouns, and that's cool. And then it does have definite articles. So it has a singular definite article and then a plural definite article. And the plural definite article, I think, is used just for all plurals. And then it also has an indefinite article. So that's kind of very Englishy. It's like, yeah, it's familiar. But the three most difficult things for me are one is the verbs are often used in conjunction with a post-verbal element. And they are both integrated into the larger TMA system, but also sometimes they're much more derivational or directional. And so you have to learn the directionals and kind of learn how they're used. And that's a lot of memorization. And so that can be difficult. Two is the causative prefix, which has many different forms. It can be ha, it's going to be ha, ha, ho, 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 and so on. And so there's a lot of different, very similar, obviously phonologically dependent alternates that you have to learn.
Right.
And the causative prefix is used a ton, and it's not always just basically causative. So it's the type of thing where you just have to learn. It's like with this one, that's what it means. A lot of memorization like that. Kind of similar to Russian perfective prefixes. And then there is the passive suffix. The passive suffix attaches directly to an old root. And so that means that a consonant that is no longer there will reappear sometime. So you just have to memorize which it is. And then second,
I feel like, can we step back from that for just 1 second? Because I feel like you really like that strategy. You're claiming it's one of the most difficult things, which it is. But like, I also feel like that shows up in a lot of your conlings. And so I feel like that's something that you majorly appreciate. We can move on after that. I just wanted to point that out.
It's one of the things that's most beautiful in language. I mean, just the fact that you have these really weird patterns that sometimes you have to memorize and sometimes seem to hint at either deeper structure or a history that you can no longer access. That's the cool thing. I mean, if it was all just very cookie cutter, then what would be the point? It wouldn't be fun. Anyway, but yeah, also the semantics of it sometimes get weird. Like, you can add that prefix to the loa verbs and get a basic transitive verb.
Okay, so it's sort of interesting. I was going to try to put a name to it, but I'm not even going to. But you can add this, what you had said was like a passive prefix?
Yeah,
or was it
it's
the
passive
causative?
everywhere. No, it's passive everywhere. Yeah.
And it turns it into a transitive style verb. Okay.
Yeah, yes, it does. And then it could also be added to certain intransitive verbs, and it does, things. So it's kind of like there is, like, in order to really learn the language and to speak it and to use it effectively, there is a lot of memorization involved in terms of how words are used. And comparatively speaking, not much to learn when it comes to the actual grammatical alternations or things like that.
Okay.
It's really a small number of things that are fairly manageable. And then after that, it's like, okay, this is exactly how the grammar works. And you say, okay, so then I can say this. No, that's not what it means. I mean, it's well formed.
Wrong word.
But that's not what it means. Yeah.
That is great. So, and that's, I think, one of the funniest parts of learning a language. You just got to not be afraid, I guess, to say really off the wall things, because something's going to come out wrong. And we actually have a friend who is Bulgarian, and he's a cellist. And so we had gone to see him perform, and afterwards I wanted to tell him that it was a beautiful concert. And so, I have Google Translate in my pocket. I could figure this out. And so,
all right.
So I went up to him after the concert, and I told him what I thought meant beautiful concert in Bulgarian, and he gave me the weirdest look. And it took him a minute because he knows English well enough that like he was able to figure out what what I meant, but the word that I use can only be used to call somebody handsome. And so like, I think at first he was like trying to figure out if I was calling him handsome during the concert, like what was going on. But yeah, you apparently weren't supposed to do that. So you've totally froze, by the way. Are you back?
Oh, let me tell you what I just experienced, because it's kind of fun. You said, and I of course had Google Translate, and so fuzz, 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 robot, 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 robot. And then basically the last thing you said, where it's like, well, obviously that was something you weren't supposed to do.
Exactly.
That was it.
Well, I think that the recording probably picked up what I was saying, so I'll tell you the
Yeah,
story
so
later.
just tell me later.
That would be enough. I think, though, this may be an appropriate time to wrap up
Yeah,
today's podcast, since your internet has been, I've been watching the bars go yellow and red much more frequently here near the end, so it may be signaling
yep.
that it's ready to give up. But I'm glad it stuck out this long and that we were able to talk today about some amazing languages that we have here. I was like, I feel like I was going to say something else, but I have no idea what. And so I
We were
stopped
all waiting with
mid-sentence,
bated breath.
and I'll just repeat my last word until I figure out where I'm going. Thank you for listening along with us today, and we hope you enjoyed, and stay grammar.
Bye.
David waved. Oh, where's my recording? There it is.